The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've been talking about Turkey being accused of sort of coddling ISIS or not being strong enough against ISIS or being sort of indifferent to ISIS, etc. And with regard to oil, we've been hearing accusations that ISIS oil is going to Turkey and being sold at really, really low prices, which would make Turkey in some sense complicit in supporting ISIS. We now have a specific allegation, and that's all it is for now, that there is, quote, evidence of the sale of ISIS oil to Turkey. That allegation comes from Russian intelligence officers who say they've spotted about 12,000 tanker trucks carrying oil parked at the Turkey-Iraqi border. Now, this is by no means an open and shut case. Russian intelligence says they identified the oil route during some reconnaissance missions, and Russia says that the vehicle's final destination was Turkey, and they believe that it is ISIS oil going to Turkey through Iraq and being sold at low prices there. Now, the problem with this hypothesis is a very, very clear one when you look at a map of the region, and the Iraqi Kurds say, this is our oil going to Turkey, not the Islamic State's oil that is parked at the border. So this is one of those situations, Lewis, where will we ever know the truth? Maybe not. Many people hear the story and they say, anything Russia says, I just wouldn't believe. Okay, well, that's certainly one reaction. The other reaction is the Kurds have no reason to lie, and there's no downside to them taking responsibility for, for this oil. So that would be a case to be built that Russia has the impetus to lie. They want to build this case. What's your sense of the story?
I agree that the Kurds don't really have any reason to lie. The Kurds are combating ISIS. And I at the same time, it's would Turkey be buying oil off of the Kurds? I don't know.
That's the next question,
yeah.
Which is, would Turkey be buying oil from the Kurds? And when we take a look at the map, the Russians claim they track the oil from Deir ez-Zor province, which is reportedly an ISIS stronghold. But if you draw a reasonable line from that province into Turkey through the Iraqi border that is being discussed here, it's hard to do that without going through Kurdish territory. And then the obvious question is, with 12,000 of these trucks, would 12,000 trucks really be able to get through Kurdish territory unabated when the Kurds, if they were aware of these trucks, would certainly act to prevent them from getting through? Something does not sound quite right here.
Yes, it's a strange story. I don't think that Russia has no reason to lie. I think Russia is a shady character in this whole thing. And
Russia's primary goal seems to be to support Assad, right? I mean, They claim it's all about fighting ISIS, but when we look at their actions in Syria, they've been going after not only ISIS, but also non-ISIS groups. So that suggests their priority is really doing anything to prevent Assad from being kicked out of power. And I agree with you. If we focus mostly on motive, there seems to be a motive here for Russia to lie, although we want to be careful. Motive alone does not a lie make.
Right, but I can understand from Turkey's point of view that incredibly cheap oil is appealing no matter where it's coming from. I mean, that might be a very hard deal to turn down. President
Erdogan, as we know, is increasingly against the internet. Is he increasingly in favor of outrageously cheap oil? That is really the question, and I think the answer is probably yes. Let's update our story on the Affluenza teen, Ethan Couch. The backstory on this is that Ethan Couch is this Texas teenager that used, quote, Affluenza as his defense in a fatal drunk driving crash 2 years ago, where his driving killed 4 people. And he pleaded guilty to 4 counts of intoxication manslaughter causing serious bodily injury. But because of his age, he was not certified as an adult for trial. And a judge sentenced him to in juvenile court to 10 years probation and a short stint in rehab, saying that, listen, his parents are so rich, right, that they're affluent to a degree that they shielded Ethan Couch from understanding the consequences of his actions. In other words, by virtue of being raised by a rich family, we couldn't reasonably have expected him to know that his actions could have these drastic consequences, so that his sentencing should not be as severe. Now, recently, he and his mother disappeared after Ethan Couch failed to appear for a December 10th meeting with his probation officer. A warrant was issued with his arrest, and he has now been apprehended in Mexico along with his mother. They were detained yesterday around 6 p.m. Central Time in Mexico. And this is just an insane, insane story. And some people are writing saying, see, he should have gotten a harsher punishment to prevent him from having fled to Mexico. That's the wrong angle. The harsher punishment should have been independent of whether there was a risk that he would flee to Mexico. The harsher punishment, Lewis, should have been because affluenza is a ridiculous defense.
Yeah, there should have been. What are you going to do? We've covered story after story of people with a ton of money getting away with, in some cases, murder,
yeah,
and in some cases just other heinous crimes because they are rich. It's very common.
But the thing is, usually when someone gets away with a crime because they're rich, it's because they paid a really good lawyer. Here, he got away with a crime for being rich because the richness itself made him blind to the consequences. I mean, it's crazy.
Well, I mean, that was the argument.
Yeah.
But let's face it, it's not because being rich, ultimately, it's not because being rich made him blind to the consequences. Ultimately, it's because he was rich. So sometimes it's just your influence, and it's not the amount of money you invest in your legal defense.
Right.
But anyway, yes, the penalty should have come from the heinous crime. And I mean, what's going to happen now? Is he going to spend time behind bars after violating probation?
Well, now he's violated probation as an adult, so he faces 8 years in prison. He has served 2 of the 10 years of probation, roughly, right? I mean, it's been about 2 years since the sentence. Let's go to Lewis, who is known for particularly harsh sentence suggestions on the show, even for like a crime once where someone killed some ducks, which is not to laugh off that that's not a serious crime, but I think Lewis called for 10 or 15 years in prison for that. What should be the sentence here now that he has violated probation?
I don't know, but I feel like it should make up for the last one. You know how in like a sports game, there will be a really bad call.
Yeah.
Later the refs will realize it, and there will be another bad call to a makeup call to counteract. I think we need a makeup sentence here.
I don't know that I like that sort of paradigm for our legal and justice system, but some people have been emailing me, and clearly they do like that idea, and they agree with Lewis wholeheartedly. So we'll see what ultimately happens. Send me your thoughts about what the sentence should be. A big question right now on the Democratic and the Republican side with regard to the primaries is, should we be looking at national polls to help us figure out who will be the Republican and Democratic nominees, or should we be focusing on state polls? Hillary Clinton has had about a 30-ish point lead over Bernie Sanders nationally for about 2 months, since the beginning of November, roughly. And in 2 new recent polls, that lead has been cut significantly from around 30 to only 16. Let's take a look at these 2 polls. And you'll notice, if you are watching along with us, that in a new Rasmussen poll, Hillary Clinton leads Bernie Sanders 46 to 30. And in a new CNN ORC poll, Hillary Clinton leads Bernie Sanders 50 to 34. In other words, 2 new polls with only a 16-point spread. Now, the demographic factors that are driving this improvement for Bernie, interestingly enough, Lewis, are non-white voters. And we've talked about how important it is for Bernie Sanders to appeal to non-white voters. Seems he's doing it.
Yeah, I think he's been doing an okay job. Doesn't help. I mean, it doesn't hurt when you are hanging out with Killer Mike and other prominent figures in, let's say, the black community and
Sure.
And things like that. But it started with the Black Lives Matter thing, and we said, why is Black Lives Matter interrupting a Bernie Sanders protest?
Sure.
It seemed like they didn't really understand who was on their side. Right?
So absolutely. And part of the national surge is driven by maybe people, non-white voters, learning about Bernie, because as Nate Silver says, most voters don't really start paying attention until a few weeks or so before the actual primaries. But we need to now look at state polls. Where will people first be voting? And we have some of the most recent state polls to show you. Let's take a look at those. If we look in Iowa, Hillary Clinton is ahead 51 to 36, about a 15-point lead. In New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders is ahead 49 to 43. In South Carolina, Hillary Clinton is way ahead 68 to 23. And in Nevada, where we have, I guess we would say, the fewest number of polls, Hillary Clinton doubling Bernie Sanders 52 to 26. So if we focus on national polls, Bernie has gained big over the last few weeks. If we focus on state polls outside of New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders is in very, very rough shape. But if Nate Silver is correct that people are just now starting to pay attention, maybe the Bernie surge is going to continue. I don't know. What do you think?
I hope it continues. I really don't know. Hillary is a juggernaut. You know, how do you take down Hillary?
Right now, we can look at either trends or we can look at the numbers. If we look at trends, that's more favorable to Bernie Sanders. If we look at numbers, after the first four primaries, Bernie Sanders may be in rough shape. We will continue to follow it. And later on today, we'll do an update of what's going on the Republican side. Some interesting things have shifted and you may not be aware. I'll remind you, I'm on Twitter at dpacman. Lewis is on Twitter at Lewis Motamedi.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is made possible directly by viewers and listeners through something called membership. Today's new member of the day is Jeremy McDonough. Jeremy, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join Jeremy at davidpakman.com/membership. And remember, January 1st, 2016, we will be having a 2016 related membership special. If you want to be notified about that, it'll be a fantastic discount. Just make sure that you are signed up to our mailing list. You can sign up at davidpakman.com. Okay, let's discuss what's happening in the Republican primary now. Donald Trump is reaching new highs in the national polls for the Republican Party, averaging around 25% support in early November. That has steadily climbed to 39% support for Donald Trump in two recent polls. One is from CNN ORC. The other is from Fox News. Ted Cruz now is solidly in second place, absolutely obliterating the flaccid campaign of Ben Carson, Lewis, which has completely fallen apart. Ted Cruz now in second place with an average of about 18%, followed by Marco Rubio, 11%, and Ben Carson, a very, very paltry 9% after being almost tied with Donald Trump in first place. At this point, I think we can say that Ben Carson is done. He never really had a chance, and now that's becoming very, very clear. Now, maybe more importantly, what's happening at the state level in early primary states? Let's look at Iowa on the Republican side. Ted Cruz is ahead there by about 3, 30 to 27. Iowa, Lewis, could be a big state for Ted Cruz. It is the only place right now where Cruz is leading, because if we look at New Hampshire, Trump is well ahead, 26% to Marco Rubio's second place, 13%. In South Carolina, Trump 34, Cruz 19, Rubio 13. And in Nevada, we really don't have much polling. The most recent polling is from October in Nevada on the Republican side. Trump 38, Carson 22. I would bet any amount of money that there is no more Carson 22 in Nevada if you do a new poll. I mean, Carson has just imploded.
Carson, seems to have completely fallen off the radar. It's unfortunate because I like listening to him talk.
Absolutely.
Especially about foreign policy. I love listening to him make a fool of himself.
Or if you're just trying to do sort of like a meditative thing. I mean, his voice is so monotone, and the words what he says is basically meaningless, so you can just sort of zone out.
It puts you to sleep.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
They could make CDs or special music made with his voice just to help you sleep. Not a bad idea.
So February 1st is the Iowa Republican caucus. If Ted Cruz wins, but only by a little bit, it may not do that much to alter the dynamics of the race. Trump is really, really surging, Lewis, and we were thinking his ceiling was going to be about 35%, two recent polls at 39%. What is Trump's ceiling? I mean, 39% is not that far from 51%, which, if my math serves me, Lewis, would get him the nomination if he can get 51% of all delegates.
Well, I guess it's between the people who care more about things other than Jesus,
right,
and the people who care more about Jesus. The Jesus side is for Cruz, the everything else side is for Trump, and so I guess, there's still some room there for Trump to go up.
Although he's not doing that poorly with evangelicals, which is absolutely stunning to me. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. We'll follow it. I maintain Donald Trump will not be the Republican nominee. Let's talk a little bit about just a drastic change in opinion from Donald Trump. Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump has changed his view on wages in the United States. Donald Trump previously said wages were just too high. One candidate 4 years ago said that rent was too damn high. Donald Trump saying that wages are too high. But now Donald Trump is saying wages are actually too low after Bernie Sanders slammed Trump and Trump's ideas about wages during a recent interview. He said on Face the Nation, look, many of Trump's supporters are a working class people and they're angry because they're working longer hours for lower wages. They're angry because their jobs have left this country and gone to China or other low-wage countries. In fact, he has said that he thinks wages in America are too high. Trump first responded to Bernie Sanders by saying, oh, Sanders is lying. Here's a tweet that Donald Trump sent out saying, Bernie Sanders, who blew his campaign when he gave Hillary a pass on her email crime, said that I feel wages in America are too high. Lie. Unfortunately, we do live in an age where things people say can be recorded on something called video. And here's Donald Trump himself in the Fox News Network debate talking about none other than wages being too high. Take a look.
I can't be, Neil. And the reason I can't be is that we are a country that is being beaten on every front, economically, militarily. There is nothing that we do now to win. We don't win anymore. Our taxes are too high. I've come up with a tax plan that many, many people like very much. It's going to be a tremendous plan. I think it'll make our country and our economy very dynamic. But taxes too high, wages too high. We're not going to be able to compete against the world.
Right. Wages too high. People are making too much. And he doubled down on this in a Morning Joe interview on MSNBC where he said, quote, our taxes are too high. Our wages are too high. Now, later, he insisted what he meant was the minimum wage is too high, not wages in general, according to Politico. So let's see if I understand. He's sticking to lowering the minimum wage, but changing his talking points to say he's going to raise wages somehow, but not the minimum wage. He's going to raise the maximum wage, apparently, which is a very scary proposition, Lewis, when you look at the current wealth inequality gap.
Yeah, the maximum wage is doing just fine. We have it's higher than ever. So yes, it's a strange flip-flop. You would think that to appeal to his base, wages should go up. The minimum wage should go up. That's probably what they want to hear, is it not?
Well, I don't know. I mean, at this point, Trump can say almost anything, even if it doesn't fit with normal Republican ideology, and the low information voters seem to love it. I mean, it's an incoherent position, right? It's like saying, well, if I didn't have all those illegals picking vegetables and doing construction because they're so lazy, it'll be easier for master's degrees recipients to get raises at their jobs because the immigrants are coming here and taking our jobs, but actually on welfare. Wait, are they taking our jobs or are they on welfare, right? It's just an incoherent position. The minimum wage is too high, but other wages are too low, and I'm going to raise them, but not the minimum wage, but for other people. What we're getting to is Trump doesn't care, and it doesn't really matter. He'll just say whatever. Trump has support. People could not care less what he says, and that's evidenced by the fact that when he shares a view with Bernie Sanders, like on dictators in the Middle East, it doesn't affect any of his base. They still love it.
It seems like he can say anything. But if he said that he's going to raise taxes, I think people might freak out at that. So
he
I mean,
said
he's
the
saying
hedge
the same
fund
thing that every
he said the
candidate
hedge
says.
fund guys aren't going to like me because their taxes are going to go up.
Well, he's telling everyone else their taxes are going to go down. And that's what every candidate says, of course.
Yeah.
Rarely does it actually happen, though.
And it would completely explode the deficit in a way that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. Let's go from Donald Trump to Ted Cruz. Republican senator and presidential candidate Ted Cruz has been gaining on Donald Trump. I told you he's now in second place solidly. It turns out that Ted Cruz's supporters are just as nutty as Donald Trump's. Here's video from C-SPAN of a woman who spoke to C-SPAN at a Cruz rally in Mechanicsville, Virginia, where she explained, well, you know what? I can't even tell you what she explained. This might be confusing to anybody with 10 brain cells, but maybe somebody in our audience can figure it out. Let's take a look at the video here.
Like Obama, no more. He's ruined our country. He's ruined Christmas. He's let the Muslims in. We can't say that word. We've got to be ashamed of everything. And we're not ashamed people. We're proud people. And we're going to take our country back. So watch out, Obama. We're coming.
How has he ruined Christmas? How has he ruined America?
He scared the little children. They're not allowed to have Santa Claus in the schools where, you know, it might offend the Muslims.
So her bulleted list of talking points is Obama ruined our country. He ruined Christmas. He let Muslims in. We need to take our country back. He has scared children and he has kicked Santa Claus out of schools. After seeing this, I'm actually more scared of a Trump presidency because it's clear that Trump and Cruz supporters could actually coalesce, right? I was thinking the Trump supporters are crazy and they are unmatched. No. The Ted Cruz supporters are up there, Lewis, and they're crazy enough to actually coalesce with the Trump supporters potentially.
Wasn't there talk from Trump about making Cruz his VP or something like that?
That rings a bell. I don't remember.
I think there was some type of exchange there. Yeah.
Just a reminder, here's Sarah Palin, a Sarah Palin supporter. This is a video from our friends over at New Left Media. This is one of Chase Whiteside's great interviews. Just to remind you that there's been craziness for a while on the Republican side. Take a look.
First female president.
What are some particular issues of Sarah's that you would like to see her bring to office?
Oh, gee. Help me out here, guys.
Fairness. Realness.
But any policies, I guess, specifically that you of hers?
I can't think of the policies right off the bat.
She's someone who can make a difference.
Yeah. What differences would you like to see her make?
I don't know. I guess I never really thought about it.
What are her proposals for health care?
I'm not really sure.
Well, what are some issues of hers that you agree with?
I'm not sure where you're going with that. What issues?
How about foreign policy? What would you like to see her do in terms of foreign policy?
To be honest with you, I don't know anything about her foreign policy.
I don't know. I really don't have an answer. I don't know.
I love it how everything's a trick question, Lewis. Like when Sarah Palin was asked, name something you read, right? Hey, listen, she's not going to be tricked into taking a position on that. Hey, what issues of Sarah Palin's do you agree with? Listen, I don't know where you're going with that, the woman said. Just absolutely amazing. And I don't know what we were looking at there for a few seconds, Lewis, but it's just everything's a trick question. Where are you going with that question? No, we're just asking, like, why do you like this politician? Is that unfair? You plan to vote for someone, tell me why.
Well, because they like her on a personal level. Right. And to many people, that's what they're voting on, right?
Apparently, yeah, the personal level. And does anybody like Trump on a personal level? I mean, that's what I'm confused about.
At the same time, could you vote for someone that you dislike on a personal level, but you agree with on policy?
Yeah, I probably could. Well, I mean, listen, there are people I know that aren't candidates that I really don't like on a personal level, media people, but I agree with their politics. And I would probably, if they were to run, I would say, this is not a person I like, but I think that they would make good decisions. So I could see doing that conceivably, yeah.
I guess I haven't been put in that position. I haven't had to do that, but I think it's a factor for everyone when you're voting, on a personal level. Do you like this person? Do you like the way they look? Do you like the way they act? For some people, that's all that matters.
Yes, as we have found out from these numerous interviews, for some people, that is absolutely all that matters. So to sum up, Ted Cruz supporters just as outrageous as Trump supporters. We'll take a break. We will be joined next by Karen Kwiatkowski.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome back to the program retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. She's joined us in the past and she's joining us again today. It's so great to have you on, and you've been talking about an issue we've been discussing quite a bit, which is escalation in Syria. We have a number of other players involved at this point. We have Russia, we have Turkey, we have discussions about ISIS and ISIL. let's talk generally first about how you see this escalation in Syria. What are its true causes, and what do you see as the possible path forward?
Well, the true causes are the people that live there in the whole region. If you want to go back fundamentally, let's just go back 15 years. Let's go back to the invasion of Iraq.
Right.
With no plan, destroying that country, which was a secular socialist dictatorship. Secular is something that you would think the United States would like. In fact, we had been allied with Saddam until just a few months before we invaded him the first time back in 1991, I guess it was. So in 1990, we were still friends with Saddam Hussein. We had sponsored him. He had CIA support. We sold weapons to him, both traditional and biochemical weapons. We sold those to Saddam Hussein because we kind of liked what he was doing. Secular socialist dictatorship, somebody we could kind of count on as a bulkhead against Iran, which we like even less. Okay, so that changes when we invade in 1991. Then we have the no-fly. So we've been attacking him then with the no-fly zone and the embargoes and whatnot for a long time. Then the second invasion, we'll just go back to that one, 2003. That one was to topple Saddam Hussein. That was a regime change operation in line with what we had done in Afghanistan and what was on paper to be done and has been done since then to a number of other countries. Libya is one of those. And Syria was on that list. So you go back to what we did in with that 2003 invasion, with no plan for handling the political and economic needs of the country, of the people. And working those people against themselves, something Saddam Hussein suppressed as best he could, and he was effective at it because he was a dictator. He's not a nice guy, but he suppressed the differences, the different groups, and he kind of forced them to work together. I mean, there was a lot of intermarriage between Sunni and Shia. Sunni and Shia were both represented in his government, along with Turks. So he forced everybody to basically get along. You would think that we would like that to some extent. That showed some sort of government-directed tolerance. Right. Not the right place for tolerance to come from, because governments are not known for that. But at least that's what he did. But when we got rid of him, we threw it all to the wind, disbanded the educated and powerful class, primarily the army officers, the military, former government workers. We disbanded those. That was the class that would have rebuilt society. But we ripped away their ability to do that. So we unleash, of course, where will power come from? Well, it'll come from different places, and those places happen to be ethnic and religious ethnic groupings. So then we see the Sunni against the Shia and against the Turkmen, the Kurd, whatnot. So that's kind of where it starts. I don't know if we remember, but there were close to 5 million displaced Iraqis outside of Iraqi borders. Many of these were in Syria. The other big, large group was in Jordan. So when you have your neighboring country pushing your refugees into think about El Paso. We whine and moan about El Paso. That's not 5 million refugees. That's not 5 million Mexicans pushing into the border because they're escaping something in Mexico. But yet we worry about that, right? So think about what 5 million is. Right. And that's what is kind of setting the stage. Of course, Jordan is funding these camps and supporting them. So is Syria. This is a burden. And what do people do when they're in camps? What do people do when they're displaced, when they used to be in power and now they're not? Well, first off, they try to survive. And then they try to reestablish some sort of order. So as that order that's being reestablished is taking its form, in many cases, a military form. So you've got all these groups susceptible. So that's one part, societal and economic breakdown that we initiated both in Afghanistan first, which maintains to this day in Afghanistan. There is no order in Afghanistan other than order provided by the Taliban, which we have, of course, decided, that was our objective, to get rid of them. Well, they're the only source of order in that country. We disordered Iraq, and many of those guys are actually in the territory of Syria now. So
and you're sort of in hearing you talk about the sort of short-sighted nature of many in instances of American foreign policy intervention in the Middle East, I can't help but be reminded of this tired old idea of arming the so-called moderates that we find in individual countries in the Middle East. And that seems to be probably a broader conversation, but yet another way in which our foreign policy is short-sighted and often backfires, is it not?
Sure, it absolutely. And you have to, if I step outside of being an American and I'm just an observer,
Right.
You have the United States, which is the biggest arms exporter in the world, with the biggest standing military in the world. More atomic bombs, more traditional bombs, more fighter airplanes, whatever. We got more of it. This is a major part of the American economy. So it's a major part of our foreign policy to give arms to people. We like to give it to countries that are, ruling their population. So we like to sell them to the Saudis. Of course, Saudis can pay for them. We like to give them to Israel. Israel could pay for them, but we don't. We have a close relationship with them. So that comes as part of their $5 billion subsidy, a huge amount of military aid that goes on there. That's Israel. Saudi Arabia pays for it, but they get a huge amount. Iraq used to get it. Okay, when they were our friends. This is why, the old joke about, we know they must have biological or weapons or chemical weapons because we have the receipts, remember? Because this is what we did back in the day
Right.
when we were working with them, with Saddam Hussein. So we give arms, we use arms, that's what we have. The old saying, if every problem, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. One of the big things, the tools that we use in foreign policy is weapon sales or weapon gifts, or loans to buy weapons, to buy American weapons. And you think about that. We're going to loan you money so you can buy American products. I mean, this sells back home. The Americans love this. They don't know that's how it works, but they say, hey, I got a job making weapons. I'm in a munitions factory and sales are good. They don't care how it happens, but that's a part of our foreign policy. So is that a mistake or is that a compulsion? I think it's a compulsion. Yes, it's a mistake and it's counterproductive, but our politicians don't see much. They don't understand how to stop that, because if you stop creating a market for your arms and you stop, subsidizing loans so people can buy your weapons, you stop giving them away, making the taxpayer buy the weapons and give them to these foreign countries or subsets within these countries, the moderates or whatever we're supporting. If you stop that, we have an employment problem that is felt almost immediately. We have a lobbying problem, which is going to be felt by the Congress immediately. I mean, you don't even have to breathe it, and the lobbyists will be calling their congressman. You can't do this. So, American foreign policy is in lockstep in a very destructive manner.
When you look at that element of this arming the moderates policy, when we look at specifically Syria today in 2015, almost 2016. Are there particular concerns you have based on what's happening in Syria with this idea of arming moderates?
Yeah. First off, okay, arming the moderates would require that you understood who are the moderates and who weren't the moderates. Would require that you understand the dynamics. I saw a video just yesterday of Putin's analysis, or he was answering a question, and you may have seen this as well. It's been around a little bit. It's pretty recent. And he explained that money drives the train around here in the Middle East and everywhere else. I mean, I'm talking about our foreign policy. It's dependent on money, arms sales. But down in places like Syria and Iraq, if you want to fight, you want a job, you want to get a paycheck, you go where the money is. Well, we didn't understand that. We don't measure that in. Our intelligence on the ground is extremely limited, and what we do have is politicized and bad. So we don't know who the moderates are. But beyond that, we don't understand the dynamic of how that changes. One thing Putin pointed out was as the ISIS and Al-Qaeda backed, basically the less moderate, the radical folks that are trying to get rid of, and of course, remember, this is all part of regime change. Part of why we're in there is because the United States policy of regime change, which hit, the Taliban, it hit Saddam Hussein, it got rid of Gaddafi in Libya. Now we're working on Syria. They want to get rid of Assad. This is American foreign policy. We want to get rid of Assad. So all of these rebel groups are trying to get rid of Assad. We picked some what we thought were moderate based on bad intel. But further than that, deeper than that, we didn't understand the dynamic. So the moderates are where they get some American money. They get some other money. They get some American arms. They get some American training. That infamous $500,000 worth of American training that resulted in like 4 trained guys who ran. Okay. How does that compare to what ISIS is offering? Well, ISIS, and there's another aspect of ISIS we need to talk about. Okay, and that's the CIA link. Okay, but ISIS itself captured some money-making things, primarily oil wells. Okay, so they're able to pay. Well, we think these other guys are doing. We think the so-called moderates are doing. Well, this is about survival. We don't live there. This is not our fight. We shouldn't be doing regime change in other countries. It's all illegal from a legal perspective, from an international law perspective, from a constitutional perspective. This is all illegal what we're doing. But beyond that, we don't understand what's going on the ground. We are unable to influence things on the ground. ISIL can do that, ISIL or ISIS, however you want to call it. There's a debate there. But those who, let's not call them ISIS, those rebels that have a money-making machine, which in this case, in that area, is some oil wells in northern Iraq and some stuff in Syria, northern Syria, near Turkey. They have oil well access, and they're able to sell that oil under, of course, illegally under the black market, but still, the oil comes out because somebody else put in the infrastructure. They stole it. That's a low investment. All they got to do is hold it, let the oil bleed out, put it in a truck. They can sell it for a penny on the dollar and still make money. Their investment is low. So these guys are producing. Now, this brings us to what Russia is doing or has been doing for the last 6 weeks or so. And what have they been doing? I mean, right?
Yeah, and I wish we even had more time to dig into the Russia connection here, because Russia's involvement in Syria, and we've been talking about that extensively, is a whole other can of worms. And to be honest, we should probably just have you back, because we are out of time today. We should have you back just to talk about the Russian element. I mean, because that's just so huge at this point, what's going on.
It is.
Let's pause there for today. We've been speaking with retired U.S. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski. And then part 2 of this conversation, which we should have soon, is discussing the Russian element and how that is playing into or playing against American foreign policy. But for today, thank you so much for being on with us.
Okay, sure, glad to do it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Marijuana is now legal in some form in 23 states, and I have a really important statistic to discuss with you that we've just received. The number of Americans who fatally overdosed on marijuana last year in 2014, for which we now have data. That number, Lewis, is 0. According to figures released this month by the Center for Disease Control, the same number of people overdosed in 2014 as the number from 2013, 0. We can't say the same for many other substances, both legal and illegal. 17,465 people died from overdosing on illegal drugs like heroin and cocaine last year. Over 25,000 people died from overdosing on prescription drugs, including painkillers and tranquilizers like Valium. And opioid overdose levels rose sharply in 2014. The CDC is now describing opioid overdose levels as an epidemic. We have a huge overdose problem we have a huge opioid problem, Lewis, here in Massachusetts, both painkillers leading to heroin. And without getting into details, if you walk around not that far from our studio, you see that issue firsthand.
Yeah, that's, of course, a much bigger problem than marijuana. I mean, I think we're pretty close to having, I don't know how many years, we can say years, recreational marijuana nationwide. I mean, I think that's going to happen. The federal level changes will be made, and then we can really focus on the bigger problems.
I don't know that I see national recreational marijuana legal anytime soon. I mean, we still have 27
Well,
states.
I'm not saying in like a year or two.
Okay, fair enough.
You know, maybe like 10 years.
And don't forget about alcohol. I mean, so accessible, killing Americans at the highest rate in 35 years. More than 30,000 Americans died from alcohol-induced causes last year, and that doesn't even include alcohol-related deaths like drunk driving or accidents. This is not about cheerleading the smoking of marijuana, right? I mean, marijuana can be psychologically addictive, if not physically. Smoking anything, whether it's marijuana or whatever, smoking is not good for your lungs. Impaired driving can be an issue. It's more about the hypocrisy, Lewis, of the classification of marijuana as a Schedule I drug in the context of what else is happening in this country.
That is true. But if someone who has that personality type and is stressed out and is having issues and is going to gravitate towards substance abuse,
sure,
wouldn't you rather have them using pot than drinking excessively? I mean, I think that, yes, that is a definite yes for me.
I think you're probably right in that particular scenario. And yes, and then this is all, of course, aside from the stifling of really exploring the medicinal applications of marijuana and cannabis, but as a result of how the drug is scheduled. So 0, the number of people who died from marijuana overdose in 2014, a very important number that we should all remember. Netherlands and Denmark have already started opening these bicycle highways, and now Germany has opened the first 5-kilometer stretch of a new bicycle highway that is set to span over 100 kilometers. It will connect 10 cities and 4 universities in the western part of Germany. It will run mostly along an unused rail corridor, railroad tracks.
Now, let me interrupt just for 1 minute here for those watching. This picture is actually Netherlands. So I couldn't find a picture of the one that we're talking about in Germany, unfortunately.
Fair enough. And I appreciate, Lewis, that you're seeking clarity this evening. Yeah. Almost 2 million people live within 2 kilometers of this route. And we see, electric bicycles, which are increasingly used to go on the uphill sections of many bike paths. Berlin, the capital, is now looking into possibly connecting the city with suburbs with one of these bike highways. The first question I had is, how is a bicycle highway different than a bike path? And one of the main differences is how they're constructed. Bike paths, because of how they're built, tree roots, and I know you've experienced this, Lewis, tree roots start to come up and create these bumpy cracks that are really bad depending on what type of bike you have, etc. Bike paths also can suddenly end or merge with a bus lane or regular streets. Bicycle highways will not. And these bicycle highways are going to be far wider, 13 feet, than bike paths. So they will actually have passing lanes. They will actually have overpasses and underpasses, whereas bike paths may not. So that is a difference. And in addition, these bicycle highways will be lit and cleared of snow during winter. Some financing issues are coming up, but this is very, very interesting.
It's wonderful. If you're in the city, this is a great idea.
Yeah.
And not as practical when you are outside of the city, but we're behind in this department. Although we're starting to see more bike lanes and bike paths and things like that in this country. Overall, of course, this is great. What's not to like?
In Western Massachusetts, there's actually a really good network of bike paths, although they do cross a lot of streets, and in some parts you're on the side of the road, and we do have the route issue where they're not really maintained that well. But the idea is fantastic, and in combination with the electric bikes, commuting by bike is going to become accessible to many more people over the next 5 years.
It's something that I'm considering doing myself here in Boston.
Yeah, when it gets warm, I think I would absolutely do it. Today, if you're in the Northeast, you may have noticed the weather is not exactly conducive to biking. I don't know that an inch of slush is the best weather for biking, but soon, Lewis. We have a voicemail number, 219-2-DAVID-P. Take a listen to this voicemail that came in.
Hello, David. My name is Hector Gonzalez, calling you from Hamilton Township, New Jersey. I've been a member of your show for about a year and a half. I kind of ran into your show when I used to have satellite TV. But anyways, now I watch you online, and I gotta say I love your show. It's very informative. I actually agree with a lot of the stuff that you say or believe in.
Right.
And I just want to say congrats on your move. Happy holidays. And and I'm looking forward to another year of great programming.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Hector's a great guy, obviously, Lewis. He may be the best guy in the world. And he has been a member for a while. A very nice voicemail from Hector. Lewis, we're trying to end the year on a positive note with regard to voicemails, right? No more anti-Semitism in the voicemail. No more homophobia. No more racism. No more talking about asking when Lewis is going to be fired, right? Let's end on a positive note with the voicemails.
Sounds good to me. That was a nice one. Makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
On the bonus show today, FedEx, major Christmas delivery problems, Al Jazeera in hot water over credibility problems, and I created a catastrophe at a Whole Foods yesterday, and I'm going to tell you about that on the bonus show. DavidPakman.com/membership. Get on our mailing list in order to be notified this Friday, January 1st, 2016, about a fantastic 2016-related membership discount.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.